Eternal Light is happy to meet you again. How are you all doing? Eternal Light prays that everyone is always peaceful, joyful, and happy in life. Today, Eternal Light wants to share with you some things we need to eliminate in order to improve our relationship with God. In the previous video, we talked about the things we need to remove, and in this video, we will focus on 6 habits you need to immediately get rid of in your life if you want to hear clearly the voice of God guiding you. Stay with us until the end of the video so you don't miss any habits that you might be struggling with, especially the 4th and 6th habits. All right, together, we will elevate our spiritual awareness through this video. Let's get started. Chapter 1, Every Day is an Opportunity. Every day is an opportunity, a precious gift from God that allows us to develop our faith, to seek, and to strengthen our relationship with Him. Yet, in the busyness of modern life, we often forget these opportunities. We race against time, worrying about work, family, and the future, to the point where we fail to realize that seemingly harmless habits can hinder our spiritual growth. A life of faith is the result of a long and persistent journey. It does not happen naturally, but is the outcome of a heartfelt investment, a choice made each day. The habits we maintain can be a solid foundation for that relationship, or they can be burdens that pull us further away from God. Bad habits not only separate us from God's guidance, but also leave our souls weary, weak, and devoid of peace and freshness in our faith. This article will discuss 6 habits that we need to abandon in order to draw closer to God, to make each day a step forward in our spiritual journey. In reality, these habits are not unfamiliar things that we have not experienced in our lives. They exist in every moment, in every decision we make, in how we face life and God. From worrying about the future to failing to spend time in prayer, these habits can lead us away from a full life in God. Instead of allowing these habits to dominate us, we can learn to let them go and replace them with actions that nurture and refresh our relationship with God. In the Bible, Jesus reminds us, "But seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." Matthew 6:33. This is a promise full of hope and assurance from God, that if we seek Him and live according to His values, all the needs of our lives will be provided by Him. However, to seek the kingdom of God, we must abandon the habits that obstruct the path to closeness with God. Bad habits are not just external barriers, but are things that reside within our minds and hearts, clouding the light of truth that God has given us. In this article, I will shed light on the 6 habits that we need to abandon, not only to regain peace in our lives, but also so that we can live a truly faithful life and strengthen our relationship with God like never before. These habits are not just obstacles we often encounter in our daily lives, but also invitations for us to reflect on ourselves and seek change. Each habit we abandon is an opportunity to draw closer to God, to live a life full of life, peace, and hope. Chapter 2, 6 habits to abandon. Number 1, excessive worry about the future. In this ever-changing world, worrying about the future seems to be an inseparable part of many people's minds. We can't help but think about what will happen, the steps we need to take ahead, our jobs, our relationships, and all the unknowns that we feel the need to control. But have we ever asked ourselves, do these worries truly bring peace, or do they only leave us more tired, confused, and seemingly lose ourselves? In a world where tomorrow has not yet come, and we can do nothing to change that, worries about the future are nothing but shadows that cloud the peace of the present. Jesus taught us this in Matthew 6:34. "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." This teaching is not just a casual piece of advice. It is a profound guide on how to live fully in God's peace. Why worry about a future we cannot control? Why let fear consume our minds when each day God provides us with everything we need? Have we become so focused on what has not yet come that we overlook the moments God has already gifted us? Worrying is not a preparation for the future. It is an invisible burden that makes our souls heavy, preventing us from sensing God's presence in every step we take. When we live in anxiety, we no longer have the strength to enjoy the blessings God gives us each day. It seems we forget that each breath, each sunrise, each act of kindness from others is a blessing from God. Instead of living in fear about the future, let us place our trust in God's provision, for He has promised never to forsake us. When we think about the people in the Bible, we see a clear illustration of placing trust in God rather than worrying about the future. Abraham, who was called out of his homeland to embark on a life he had no idea would lead to what, is a prime example. Abraham did not know what the future would hold, but he trusted in God's promise, and it was that faith that led him to unimaginable things. God called him to go, and Abraham walked without any predictions about what the future would look like. His faith in God's provision was the light that guided him, helping him to overcome challenges and difficulties that seemed insurmountable. We can also learn from Jesus, who lived through trials, suffering, and abandonment. When he prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, he did not ask for his future to be different, but simply asked the Father to lead him through life's challenges with absolute trust in his will. He trusted that no matter what the future held, he would never be forsaken. This teaching of Jesus serves as a reminder to us that we cannot control everything in life, but we can always live in trust in God. I wonder if my worries are a sign of a lack of trust in God's provision. When I worry about things I cannot change, I slowly lose faith in His goodness. It becomes an endless cycle. I worry about what is to come, and the more I worry, the less I can feel His peace in the present. Then, as time passes, I realize that I have missed the precious moments God has given me because I have lived in anxiety instead of gratitude and peace. Worrying about the future is not only a futile endeavor, but also a disconnection from the present, from the blessings that God has bestowed upon us. Why not live fully in the present moment, enjoying the life that God has given and trusting in His guidance? When I learned to let go of my worries about the future, I began to feel a peace in my heart. A peace that did not come from the ability to control everything, but from an absolute trust in God's provision and direction. Each day is an opportunity for us to live in God's peace, to focus on the good things in life that He has provided. When we stop worrying about the future, we open the door for God's peace and provision to enter. And so we can fully embrace what God has prepared for us in the present. The future will come, but only when we know how to live fully in each moment today, trusting that God will always be with us, guiding us every step of the way. Number 2, not spending time in prayer. There are moments in life when one feels as though they are caught in the whirlwind of worries, endless tasks, and the busyness of modern life. Time seems insufficient to accomplish everything, and in that rush, we often forget the important things, the things necessary to maintain a strong and deep relationship with God. Prayer, a simple yet profoundly meaningful act, is the key to sustaining that relationship. However, in the hustle and bustle of life, few people dedicate enough time to prayer. Sometimes we treat it as a duty or even a habit that only appears when we face difficulties, as a way to calm our hearts in the face of challenges. But prayer is truly a necessary act, a way to maintain our connection with the Creator, a step in the journey to find the meaning of life. Jesus, in His life, spent much time in prayer. He didn't just pray when facing challenges or in need of strength, but prayer became an essential part of His life. In Luke 5:16, we read, "But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." This is a vivid image of the intimate relationship Jesus maintained with His Father. He didn't only pray in difficult moments, but He prayed as part of His daily life. This wasn't just a religious habit, but the way Jesus maintained His connection, seeking guidance and strength from the Father. He didn't act according to His own will, but always placed every decision under God's guidance. The prayer life of Jesus, therefore, is a model for us, His followers. It's not just an act to ask for blessings, but also a means of maintaining communication, to hear His voice in every decision, in every step of life. If Jesus, the Son of God, needed to pray, how can we, full of imperfections and weaknesses, neglect this? Prayer is not just pleading or requesting. It is the blending of the human soul with God, a conversation between a child and their loving Father. Without prayer, our relationship with God will slowly weaken. Much like a person who hasn't met their friends in a long time, gradually losing the connection they once had. Prayer is not a task that we must perform as a condition to be accepted or blessed. It is a natural act that flows from a heart that loves and reveres God. Prayer does not have to last for hours, nor does it need to be done in a rigid, formulaic way. Whether it's just a few minutes each morning when we wake up, or as we prepare for sleep, what matters is that we take that time to open our hearts before God. It is a moment when we can express our feelings, our anxieties, our joys, or our sorrows, and allow God to guide, comfort, and refresh our souls. Perhaps many of us in the midst of busy times have forgotten the importance of prayer. We chase after goals, plans, and concerns of life, forgetting that all success or failure lies in the hands of God. A day without prayer can feel like a day without true life because it lacks the connection to the one who created us. Prayer is the opportunity to find peace again, to renew our relationship with God, to restore the strength of our weary souls, exhausted by endless battles. Not spending time in prayer is like building a wall between ourselves and God. We may think that we can face everything on our own, that we don't need anyone's help, but in reality, humans cannot overcome everything by themselves. Only through prayer, through communication with God, do we realize how much we need Him. This relationship cannot simply exist through outward actions. It must be nurtured through prayer, through sharing, and listening. Let us remember the figures in the Bible who found guidance and comfort through prayer. Specifically, I think of Daniel, who never abandoned prayer even when faced with prohibition. Daniel prayed 3 times a day, and it was this that helped him stand firm in faith despite all challenges. Prayer is the healing balm for the soul, the infinite source of strength that helps us overcome all adversity, just as Jesus did in his moments of difficulty. At some point, each of us must face great difficulties and challenges in life. During those times, prayer is not just an act of asking for blessings, but the only means through which we can find peace in God. A day without setting aside time for prayer is a day we separate ourselves from the true source of life, a day when our souls must struggle alone in this world full of traps. Indeed, prayer is the key that helps us maintain a close relationship with God. And only when we truly set aside time for this communication can we live a meaningful life, not one filled with fear or exhaustion, but one that is lived in the peace of God. Remember that each day is an opportunity to draw closer to God, to seek His guidance, and to live in reverence and gratitude towards Him. Prayer is not just a part of life, but life itself, the breath of the soul. Number 3, working without God's guidance. In the weary moments of life, when one feels lost among the decisions that must be made, when feelings of confusion and unease take over, we often ask ourselves whether we are on the right path. It is during these times when our hands seem to grasp conflicting thoughts that we tend to act on instinct, without external guidance, without the leading of the Creator. We make decisions on our own, believing that we understand the situation and can control everything. But in a world full of complexity and unpredictable elements, a lack of God's guidance can easily lead to serious mistakes. The Bible, with its infinite wisdom, teaches us that important decisions in life cannot solely rely on human strength and understanding. In Genesis 12, verse 1-4, we see one of the exemplary models of seeking guidance from God, and that is Abraham. When God called Abraham to leave his homeland and family, He made no clear promises except a simple invitation. Yet Abraham obeyed because he trusted in God's guidance. Abraham did not act on his own wisdom, but placed his full trust in God's teachings. He did not make decisions without God's guidance because he understood that only God's leading could lead him to the right choices. In this context, Abraham's story becomes a model for all who believe in God. Abraham was not only a leader of a nation, but a person who sought God's guidance in every decision, whether big or small. His obedience to God's call, even without a clear plan, is a testament to his faith in the infinite guidance of the Creator. If Abraham, in an unclear situation, chose to trust God, then why can't we, in our everyday small decisions, take a moment to listen for His guidance? We as modern individuals easily forget the necessity of seeking God's guidance. In a society full of comforts and seemingly endless opportunities, we feel we can make all the decisions ourselves. However, sometimes the absence of God's guidance leaves us feeling empty and unsuccessful. The lack of God's direction makes it easy for us to go astray, make wrong decisions, and possibly lose the peace and happiness He desires to give us. Seeking God's guidance is not just an option in times of need, but a way of life, a daily practice of following a principle. When we allow God to lead in every step of our lives, we not only avoid mistakes, but also open the door to peace, joy, and fulfillment. Like Abraham, we are called to obey and trust in God's guidance in every decision, big or small. Therefore, we need to learn to pause and ask for God's guidance before each decision. When we act according to His instructions, life becomes clearer, more peaceful, and we will not feel lost. Obedience and seeking God's guidance are the keys to living a meaningful life in alignment with the purpose He has prepared for us. Number 4, abandoning gratitude. Gratitude is one of the most important virtues we can cultivate in this life, but sometimes in the rush of life, it seems to become something distant. The act of thanking God, which is a natural response when receiving mercy and blessings from the Creator, is easily forgotten in moments when we think everything that comes to us is a given, the result of our personal efforts. It is then that we begin to forget that all good things come from God's hand, that blessings are not something we deserve, but are an unconditional gift from Him. Yet, in moments when we feel we have achieved what we wanted, we easily overlook gratitude instead of stopping to give thanks. One of the most profound examples of gratitude in the Bible is the story of the 10 lepers healed by Jesus in Luke 17, verses 11 to 19. 10 lepers who had endured isolation and pain for a long time were healed by Jesus. However, among them, only one returned to thank Him. The other 9 continued on their journey without any word of thanks or recognition for the grace they had received. They had received a great miracle, but forgot to stop and give thanks. Such a small action, returning to give thanks, became a testament to the lack of gratitude. When we look back at this story, there is an ironic truth that we cannot ignore. God lacks nothing. He does not need our thanks to complete Himself, but gratitude is essential for us, for our souls. When we abandon gratitude, we are also abandoning the opportunity to strengthen our relationship with God, to realize that everything we have is a priceless gift He has given to us. Without thankfulness, we begin to see the good things that come into our lives as mere natural occurrences, no longer as miracles or divine intervention, but simply the result of personal efforts and strategies. This is not only a moral deficiency, but also a spiritual one. When we abandon gratitude, we also lose the ability to clearly recognize the blessings God has given us. We live as if we are the center of the universe, as if everything is the result of our own efforts and skills. But in reality, without God's gifts, we have nothing. Without His guidance, His care, and His love, we would have nothing. Every breath, every step, every joy is a gift from Him. And if we do not stop to give thanks, we will never fully realize the value of these things. The lack of gratitude causes us to lose humility and easily fall into arrogance. When we do not express thanks, we take for granted that we have the right to receive without any need to respond. But gratitude is a way to remind ourselves of where everything comes from. It is a way for us not to forget that this life is not a series of random events, but a process beautifully arranged by the Creator. Therefore, gratitude is not just a habit, it is an indispensable part of our relationship with God. Every day, even if only for a few seconds, we should stop, recognize the things He has given us, and thank Him from the bottom of our hearts. Remember, like the 10 lepers, we too have received great blessings from God, and not just once in our lifetime, but every day. In every moment, we have reasons to give thanks. Number 5, lack of patience and impatience. Lack of patience is one of the easy traps that people can fall into, especially in a world that constantly demands quick change and immediate results. We live in a society where speed has become the measure of success. And when faced with difficulties and challenges, we often feel like we cannot wait any longer. We cannot endure any more. The feeling of impatience overwhelms our reason, causing us to forget that in our most difficult moments, God is waiting for us, not to act the way we expect, but to teach us the lesson of patience, of trusting in His perfect timing. One of the most vivid examples in the Bible of patience is the story of Joseph. a young man full of ambition, but betrayed by his brothers and sold away. Joseph, instead of regretting or complaining, patiently endured injustice, mistreatment, and deceit. Imprisoned for many years, abandoned in the darkness of trials, Joseph never gave up his faith in God. Throughout those years, he never lost faith in God's justice, even though everything around him seemed to be turned upside down and crumbling. Eventually, when everything was set in place, Joseph was not only restored, but became a leader in Egypt. This was not a random outcome or a sudden miracle, but the result of unwavering patience, waiting in the confidence that God would act at the right time. This reveals a painful truth that not all of us are easily willing to accept. Sometimes we cannot see the reason for the difficulties we face. Challenges may last longer than we expect, and salvation seems distant, out of reach. But it is precisely in those moments that we learn that patience is not just waiting aimlessly, but a willingness to trust in God's intervention, even when we do not understand His plan. Patience is a painful lesson, but it is a necessary one to help us truly understand the meaning of salvation and faith. Impatience, in contrast to patience, causes us to seek quick solutions, but we fail to understand that some things cannot be rushed. Our lives, not a series of quick decisions, but rather a long journey with phases that need to be awaited and experienced. When we are impatient, we may miss opportunities to learn and grow in our faith. It is precisely in those moments of waiting that we learn how to renew our relationship with God, how to recognize His presence in every moment of life, and how to find peace in stillness instead of seeking rapid change. Joseph was not only an example of patience, but also an example of steadfast faith. When everything seemed to go against what he expected, he still trusted in God's guidance. Patience is not just about enduring. It is a manifestation of faith in God's perfect timing. Let every challenge, every difficulty in life become an opportunity for us to learn patience, and let us trust that in those moments of waiting, God is always with us, leading and protecting us. Number 6, not knowing how to forgive forgiveness. A short word, yet a deeply challenging task, an ongoing test, not only for others, but also for ourselves. Everyone can easily understand the concept of forgiveness, but practicing it is a different story. In this world where hurt and loss are ever present, forgiveness becomes a difficult concept to approach, especially when it touches on the deep pain that one has endured. But through the teachings of Jesus Christ in the Bible, we are reminded of a harsh reality, a painful but necessary truth. Forgiveness is not a choice, but a requirement from God for us. Jesus teaches, forgive 70 times 7, Matthew 18, 21, 22, a number that is limitless, not for us to count, but to understand that God's forgiveness for each of us is immense and boundless. In the moments when we feel hurt to the core, when wounds remain unhealed, when pain piles up and injustice cannot be explained, forgiveness is a pinnacle of faith. It is hard to accept that God asks us to forgive those who have hurt us, those who may not deserve forgiveness, but it is in that act of forgiveness that we learn how to grow in faith and humility. It is not by chance that Jesus chose examples of forgiveness in extremely painful and challenging situations. Consider the story of the soldiers who crucified Jesus. Although they were the ones who directly caused his death, in his final moments, Jesus still uttered words of forgiveness. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Luke 23:34. These words are not only a demonstration of boundless love, but also a profound lesson in how to forgive. We, with all the pain life brings, are still called to forgive, not because others deserve it, but because in God's eyes, we too do not deserve His forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about forgetting the pain, but choosing not to let that pain dominate our hearts. When we hold on to anger and hatred, it not only hurts others, but also damages us. Forgiveness, in a spiritual context, is not about erasing the wrongs of others, but freeing ourselves from the burden of hatred. It is an act of liberation, not just for others, but for ourselves, so that we are not bound by wounds that cannot heal. Think about the story of Joseph in the Bible. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold away, abandoned, and imprisoned for many years. But when he met his brothers again, Joseph did not seek revenge, did not condemn them, but forgave them. He realized that what they had done to him, though painful, was part of God's plan to save his family and the nation. For Joseph, forgiveness was not an act of forgetting or accepting what had happened, but an act of accepting the greater plan of God. His forgiveness not only freed him from the pain, but also brought peace to his heart and to his relationship with the brothers who had betrayed him. We too, in every trial and in every relationship, must learn how to forgive. This does not mean we should overlook wrongdoing, but it means learning to let love rise above justice, learning to see people through the lens of the unconditional forgiveness that God has shown to each of us. Forgiveness is an indispensable part of the believer's life, not only to live in harmony with others, but also to live in peace with oneself, not to be imprisoned by old wounds, and not to let hatred take over our hearts. Therefore, in those difficult moments, when the hurt becomes too much to bear, we are called to look at the perfect example of forgiveness in Jesus Christ. He forgave us when we were still his enemies, and he does not ask us to do this because others deserve it, but because we need forgiveness to free ourselves from the chains of resentment. Forgiveness is the path to peace. It is the key that helps us find freedom in our souls. Chapter 3. Advice and Practical Methods. Advice and practical methods are valuable tools for gradually achieving change in our lives. However, they only truly matter when we understand their deeper purpose, when we recognize that change is not just an outward action, but a revolution within the soul. In a world full of upheaval and challenges, where people can easily be swept into worries about the future or endless work, planning and creating a favorable environment are not just simple strategies, but a call for us to seek peace and the guidance of God. The story in the Bible about the necessity of planning and action is clearly seen through the example of Nehemiah, who worked tirelessly to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Nehemiah did not act impulsively, but he took time to pray, plan in detail, and prepare step by step before taking action. In Nehemiah 2 verse 5, he prayed to God and said, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city of Judah, where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild it." This is a clear demonstration of how to plan for action in trust of God's guidance. Action can start from small things like praying every morning or letting go of unnecessary worries about the future. In these seemingly simple acts, we find peace and closeness with God. But that plan will not succeed without a favorable environment. People, like trees, need good soil to grow. And the good soil here is not material conditions, but people with strong faith who will support and remind us to remain steadfast in faith during difficult times. Jesus said in Matthew 18:20, "For where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there am I with them." This not only shows the presence of God in moments of prayer gatherings, but also serves as a reminder of the strength of the faith community. If we are alone, easily swept into the world, the companionship of our brothers and sisters in faith helps us stand firm. Worship services, hymns, and prayer groups are not just forms of worship, but means to nourish our souls, reminding us that God is present and guiding us. This is also demonstrated through the story of Abraham. When he received God's promise that he would have a large offspring, he did not see this as easy or natural. Although he and his wife were old, he trusted and walked according to God's guidance. It was through this walk that Abraham created an environment for faith to blossom. He did not act alone, but always sought communication with God through prayer, through reminders and encouragement from God. If Abraham had not maintained this relationship, perhaps he would have given up early. But it was this connection that helped him remain steadfast and achieve the miracles that God had promised. Creating a favorable environment is not easy. The world around us is full of temptations, difficulties, and a disconnect from spiritual values. But it is precisely in these environments that God wants us to be the light. Those with strong faith will always be the firm pillars, helping us withstand every challenge. As Jesus taught in Matthew 5, verse 14, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden." When we create an environment of worship, when we nourish our souls through prayer and studying the Bible, we not only change ourselves, but also become a source of light for those around us. In practice, planning for action and creating a favorable environment is not a simple or easy task. It requires perseverance and trust in God's guidance. Um, but through each small step, each right decision, each day we dedicate time to pray, study the Bible, and work with those who have strong faith, we will notice profound changes in our lives. And thus, step by step, we will grow closer to the perfection that God desires and to the peace that He has set aside for us. The conclusion about the habits that need to be abandoned in the life of a believer is not only a lesson about the weaknesses we need to correct, but also a strong call to become aware of the things that hinder our relationship with God. From worries about the future to a lack of patience or forgiveness, all reflect aspects of our souls that God wants us to change so that we can live a life closer to Him. However, this is not an easy process. We need determination, perseverance, and a heart willing to be transformed. Nevertheless, the important thing is that we must trust in God's guidance and recognize that He is ready to help us overcome these habits if we truly seek change. The first habit we need to abandon is excessive worry about the future. In reality, worry is not something God wants us to bear. He has taught us, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." Matthew 6:34. In God's teaching, we see that worry is simply a form of lack of trust in God's provision. As Jesus' words in the book of Matthew remind us, He not only emphasizes the need to live in the present, but also opens the door to peace that we can enter if we know how to place our trust in Him. It is in trusting God that we can find freedom from worry, and our hearts will not be disturbed. However, this does not mean that life will not have challenges. We continue to face difficulties, but how we face those challenges is what truly matters. Impatience, another habit that needs to be abandoned, has often caused us to miss opportunities to witness God's intervention in our lives. In the Bible, Joseph had to endure many years of imprisonment and humiliation. But through all those trials, Joseph remained patient, waiting for the time when God would act. It was this patience that elevated Joseph to the heights of glory when he became the second in command in Egypt under Pharaoh's leadership. In reality, we cannot rush God to act according to our desires. Time is something that God uses to refine us so that we become people with a steadfast faith, people who can recognize that everything has its time. Another habit we need to abandon is the inability to forgive. Forgiving is not an easy act. Wounds and betrayals can make us feel like we cannot forgive someone. However, Jesus taught us in Matthew 18:21-22 that we must forgive not just 7 times, but 77 times, meaning there is no limit. Forgiveness, though difficult, is the key for us to live in peace and freedom. It is not just about releasing our hearts from anger, but also about how we show God's love to those around us. When we look at these habits, we realize that they are all directly related to our relationship with God. If we allow worries, impatience, or a lack of forgiveness to control our lives, we will not be able to live in the peace that God has promised. But if we abandon these habits, if we are determined to live according to what God teaches, then our relationship with Him will become deeper and stronger. And that is why it is important that we take action now. Do not wait until tomorrow. Do not wait until everything is perfect. Start today. Maybe you just need to spend a few minutes each morning praying, or even just pause for a moment to remember God's provision for today. Starting with small actions, you will notice a change in yourself. And each day, as you apply these habits to your life, you will feel closer to God and the peace He gives. As Jesus taught in Matthew 7:7, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you." Do not hesitate to come to God. Do not be afraid to face the habits that need to be abandoned. For in humility and determination, God is always ready to uplift us, turning challenges into opportunities for us to grow in faith. Start today and live in the freedom that God has already prepared for us.